KR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
So when does it make sense to go down to one car? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, we're not taking phone calls today, and Tony, Joe, and I are going to cover quite a bit of information. We like to take these times and he and I talk a little bit about things that we think that you need to know. If you got a question for me, you can always go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Look for the Ask Bob section and send it in. Well, Tony, Joe, it's NFL playoff time, which is the good news, but the bad news is that we're probably a month or so away from no football, and I know what a funk you get into.
Yeah, I'm depressed when there's no football.
You are. I see it
for a few months, and then training camp starts again, and then I'm a little more upbeat, and then the season begins, and I'm back in shape.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about when do you get. We started to talk a little bit about this last week, and the bottom line question is: do you drive the wheels off your car, or do you get a new car? I mean, at some point, there comes the time that you just go, maybe it's a safety issue, maybe it's too many repair bills. Not dependable anymore, but sometimes you go, maybe having a car payment is not such a bad thing. So one of the things that was really interesting to me is that I asked you, is there kind of a benchmark as far as miles go? We didn't really get a chance to talk about this, expand on it. But is there a benchmark that once you get to this point, you're probably looking at your car thinking, okay, I've gotten 95% of the value out of this car. Now, need to really start thinking about when do I want to sell this. Talk about why you came up with 300,000 miles, because you've said in the past you see cars 350, 400,000, and why was 300,000 the benchmark?
Well, I see cars. Yes, I have seen cars with 400,000, but the norm that I'm seeing in the real world in the repair facility that I'm at is we see cars with 220, we see cars with 240, 250. It isn't uncommon anymore. And people are repairing them because they're still, a lot of times I have to help them decide, but these cars are still going strong, and they need mostly, if it's something like a water pump or a set of brakes or a tune-up, these are all maintenance items that you would have to do eventually with any vehicle. So here's why I picked 300,000. It's complicated more so today than ever, Bob. And the reason it is because so many more people now are working from home, as opposed to 3 or 4 years ago, before COVID. Most people had to get in the car and drive to work. So now I look at it as this. All right. Let's say you got 40,000 miles on your car and you're wondering how long you should keep this car. This is just where I'm starting from.
Right.
Okay. Well, I mean, generally, let's say if you maintain the automobile, change the oil, do the proper maintenance, most cars can go on average 300,000 miles if they're maintained. I see it all the time. So I'm going with that. So if you're 40,000 miles on your car and you're a person that only works, say, 2 days a week or works from home and only drives on errands and weekends, calculate how many years it would take you, and that will give you to get to 300, and then that will give you an idea of how long you can probably keep your car. Now, having said that, there's exceptions to every rule. This is just a general statement that I've come up with just off my top of my head. And I want to point out that there are occasions where people sometimes drive, let's say, Bob, some people only drive 5,000 miles in a whole year. You know, the chances are you're going to end up just being sick of that car before you. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you just want to change, and that's okay.
But I think, though, that for most people, tell me if you agree or not, for most people, the reason they're keeping that car is not because they like the car. They're looking at, I don't have a car payment.
Right. Efficiency and economics.
Right.
Yeah. And there's no doubt about that. This is kind of what I'm getting at is most of the time you have a car, and I've noticed because I have been around long enough for, Bob, the parents used to be young like me and how would fix their car, and now their little babies that were in the car seats are now coming in saying, hey, Mom wanted me to have you take a look at this noise in this car. You know, the kids are now driving. So I've gone through a generation.
Or two.
Maybe. Let's not bring that up. So now I'm thinking differently because I'm thinking, well, if the second generation is now driving, the people that are older are actually, Bob, you wouldn't believe it, but even though the car has a few issues and it needs repairs every now and then, they're comfortable with it. They like the way it drives. They like to park it at the grocery store. They just like the car because they feel secure in that car and they don't want to change. I've known older people who don't even want to rent a car when their car is in for a 2 or 3 days problem that they need a car to get around. They just don't want to give it up because they're comfortable and secure with it. So we've got all kinds of issues across the spectrum of when do you get rid of a car. There does come a point when it's economically not feasible to keep that car anymore. You're dumping money into it. Things are going wrong. It could be from here's something else we need to talk about if we get a chance today, and that's not driving it enough. Not driving it enough can cause problems.
So that begs the question. There's many factors you can look at for that provide the reason to get rid of a car. But do you put more emphasis on mileage or year or how old the car is? Because you could have that situation where you're driving 5,000 to 10,000 miles a year on a car, and that for 300,000 miles that lasts a long time.
Mm-hmm. And this is the point of contention that I would recommend. People are going to have to you may need to call people and you may need to discuss it with friends and relatives and mechanic and, get as much input as you can. There's an awful lot of available information online now, but you're going to have to make the decision based on your personal driving habits, your personal finances, your personal preferences with the vehicle, and it's going to be different for some. You cannot make a general rule for everybody. It will not fit.
I call that, and that's in my business, I call that the textbook answer, which doesn't always make sense for everybody.
Yeah.
You can't take something and go, this applies to everybody.
Oh, that's good. Textbook answer. Okay.
Answer.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, there's no textbook answer that I can think of that would fit every profile of every person. It would have to be taken on a case-by-case basis, but there's always the advantage that you have now of all kinds of information that you can get online. Most of it is pretty good. You can always talk to other people about it and make up your own mind because it's going to be different for everybody.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to this special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. I guess if you got a question for Tony Joe, you can send one in there as well, and we'll bring them up on the program next week when we do the radio show live. Let's talk a little bit about routine maintenance.
Okay.
You're following the book.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the book goes, I don't even know how the book goes. The book goes.
It ends. I know what you're about to get to. Yeah. Comes a point where there is no more rules and regulations to follow.
So what do you do?
Well, that's when hopefully you have someone that you can trust that's been working on your car, kind of knows your car, and then from the point where the maintenance schedule ends, the technician has to come in there and pick up on what to do next and what to keep an eye on. There are an awful lot of things that you need to check on a vehicle. I've had a lot of people come in and they want something repair and they want a general check over just to see what kind of condition it's in. That takes a lot of time. A general check over, checking things that you normally wouldn't check according to a maintenance schedule, can be developed right out of your own mind. And I go by a lot of, I really start with tires, wheels, wheel bearings, and then I look at shocks, CV axles. There's an endless number of things that you just have to kind of visually inspect. Then you calculate, well, how many miles has it got? What do you think the chances are that these are going to wear out anytime soon? And it's really kind of a puzzle to put together, but you need to know the car. That's why it's important. Some people just go to the nearest repair facility to get a car fixed, and that's it. And nobody knows that vehicle. Every mechanic in town has done different things to it. So you try to get a good rapport with somebody, and over time, that person can recommend you or help you make some kind of a decision when the time comes.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. We're not taking live calls today, and if you do have a question for me, you can go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Send it in. If you do send in a question for Tony Joe, make sure you leave a lot of detail, because he always comes back saying, did the email say this or say this or that? And we can get to it next week. This is Bob Brooks. We're up against a break. Stick around. I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org. At pastorchuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at pastorchuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org.
I'm John Eder of Live the Word. I want to invite you to join me at 4:45 weekdays right here on KDKR 91.3 FM. We look at our world in light of what the Bible says the world's going to look like before Jesus Christ returns. And we answer some important questions, very practical questions about how do we live in a day like this. So join us again, 4:45 p.m. right here, 91.3 FM, Bible School Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson with the Point of View Radio Talk Show. I want to invite you to listen to our program on KDKR from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m. Monday through Friday. We look at various issues from a biblical perspective. Our topics range from politics and economics to the Bible, theology, and apologetics. We also bring authors and informed experts to the program. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. Hope you'll join us every day on Point of View right here on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Once again, if you got a question for me, please go to the website and send it in. We'll get you taken care of. Now, this is going to sound like maybe a crazy question. Can you actually get to a point that you have completely replaced everyking
on a vehicle?
Yeah.
No, you can't.
Is that a crazy question?
Well, it's yeah, okay. Replacing everything. If you had
of significance.
Yeah, no, it's not like you think. For instance, let me just give you an example. People go, well, my air conditioner's not working. Okay, well, there's a lot of different parts that comprise what you normally think of as the air conditioning system. So because you had a leaky evaporator core and it was replaced and it cost a lot of money, you tend to think you got a new air conditioning system. Why would it break next year? You just had a new AC. No, you didn't get a new AC system. It's not like in your home where they put in a compressor, an outside unit, and even that's not the whole AC system. But, it takes a lot to understand the way the vehicle works and the parts that normally break. But to change everything on a car, no, you would never reach that point. If you did, just because you had a lot of money and wanted to do it, you would find out that you would not keep that car. Normal people couldn't afford it, nor would they keep it, nor would they even be smart to keep it. It would be something that you just would never do.
So let's talk a little bit. You've mentioned this before. I think this is great advice. If you are the type that keeps cars for a long time, you have to get, let's say, a water heater replaced,
hot water
water
heater.
pump.
Okay, water pump. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's a major item that's going to require a lot of maintenance time, taking the engine apart and getting down to that core item to replace it. Mm-hmm. And you've always said, now I just want to bring this back up, let you talk a little bit about that, is that it makes sense to replace items that would cost a lot of money that you're already down there, mm-hmm. and it would save you a lot of money in the long run to repair. Talk about that.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to understand that for most people that aren't mechanically inclined, but there are occasions, and the first thing that comes to my mind would be a timing belt replacement, which is a maintenance item due to be changed every X amount of 1,000 miles. Different on different cars, but let's just say 100,000 miles. So you have to remove an awful lot of parts and pieces to get to the actual timing belt, and the belt rides around a number of different devices. So the object is you're changing the belt because you don't want it to break. So you've got to replace not just the belt, but you've got to replace all the items that belt touches that have bearings in them, because if you don't, you may have a bearing failure 20,000 miles after you put the belt on, and what's going to happen is the belt's going to break. And then you've just destroyed what you set out to do, which was try to avoid the timing belt from breaking. So the timing belt itself is a rubber belt, just like a drive belt, and it wears out normally at a certain amount of mileage. There is a life expectancy on it. And when you replace it, you will find in most cases that the mechanic wants to replace all the things that the belt touches, like the water pump and the tensioners and the pulleys and the bearings and the idlers and and it's really, really necessary. Sometimes you feel like you're being taken advantage of, so you could research it, and it will be clear to you after you look and listen to some of the online discussions about it, where it is far better for your benefit to change everything while you're in there, because it costs nothing labor-wise to do it. You're already in there. The parts already have to come off. Why pick up the old part and put it back on when it could fail? So you pick up the new part, and that way it's not going to fail. And
I guess you definitely want to make sure that you understand what's being charged, and so you're not being overcharged or double dip.
That's right. You can also be careful that, some of the operations on one job are all combined into one hourly number, whatever that hour rate times hours, 3 hours times whatever the hourly rate of the shop is. What you don't want to do is find out that they're charging you for everything they're putting on the car separately, because that's not how that job is combined, and it can be very pricey if you price it that way. So you want to be careful that you're not being taken advantage of in that respect.
Let me give you a scenario. Let's say that you have a car with 250,000 miles on it, and you've got to repair a pretty major repair bill. It's going to cost $3,000. How do you make that decision with that many miles on it to go forward with the repair?
Okay. What I do in that case, where there's a lot of miles on the car and we've got faced with this big repair, we don't know whether we should just part ways with the car or should we go ahead and fix it and keep it. Well, you have to kind of go over with someone that knows about the car. Hopefully you're a mechanic or somebody who's knowledgeable, and ask yourself, look, what are the expensive things on a car? Okay, the engine, obviously, and, you know, you've got this big problem. So does the transmission shift good? Does it work good? Does the air conditioning system work good? You know, these are all really expensive items that would cost a ton of money to replace if you face this $3,000 repair and then all of a sudden your air conditioner doesn't work and that's going to cost another $2,000 and your transmission goes out and that's going to cost another $3,000. You know, this is where you want to don't fall into the, this is where you don't want to fall into this money pit. And the way you avoid that is to have someone who's familiar with your car and try to consult with 2 or 3 other people. Don't just depend on one person. Your mechanic is a good guy to talk to, but try to talk to other knowledgeable people and see if what they think, because the more inputs you get on a decision-making process, the better you are able to make a prudent decision because of all the information you have at your disposal.
Okay, so here's another way to look at it, and there's obviously you could fall into the trap of the textbook answer on this, but you have a car that's valued. I mean, you've put the miles on it. It's valued at say $5,000.
Okay.
So any major repair bill could be a good percentage of the value of the car. So is there a percentage of value that you just don't want to cross in when it comes to repair costs? Do you ever look at it that way?
Yeah, that's interesting. That is kind of an interesting topic because I will tell you sometimes you will end up putting more money into the car than it's worth.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that because you see, you've got to look at several different items. And Bob, here we go again with you and I together would team up with this and both understand this aspect of it. What's your personal financial position? Can you afford to buy another car? Can you afford to get out of this car and to get in something else? Can this car, once it's fixed, if everything goes right, you'll have a good car for another, say, 100,000 miles. I mean, not maintenance free, but you'll have a good car that you can depend on for another pretty good stretch. And is that your choice? That would you want to keep it? Because I have seen where that you put more money into, usually you can tell a good car, it has a good track record. I'm just throwing one out there like a Camry, Toyota Camry. Good track record, really good foundation, been around forever. Do you want to put more into that old Camry than it's worth, even though you know it'll probably keep running for another 100,000 miles? Yeah, I guess some people would, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're good on gas. You know, they're good. They're economical to run. You can park it easy. It's not too big. It's not too small. So it might fit you. Now, you say, well, let's say I don't want to do that. Well, now you're going to have to obviously replace it. So what's it going to cost to replace it, either with another Camry or something a like kind of vehicle? Well, that's where the kicker comes in. Can you afford that? If you can't afford it, sometimes it's okay to replace the part that you need, even though it may exceed the value of the automobile. And that's not always a bad decision. It just depends on a lot of people's inputs, what you think, and a lot of your personal situation. Financials, you know, which is not the mechanic's business. It's not anybody's business. This is why you have to get as much input as you can and then make your own decision, because it could be different, Bob. Like you said, no textbook answer. It could be different for different situations.
So
I personally put more money into my vehicle than it's worth every time I fill it up with gas. So here's a good example right here.
Right. Well, tell me this, car brand wise, do you see a consistent car brand lasting longer? And this isn't to advertise any car brand or say this is better than any others, but do you see a consistent make that's high mileage and stays in good shape?
Yes. I will tell you, there is that out there. We don't promote anything around here. We know that, but let me put it to you like this. All the cars out there right now that have survived to this point are all pretty good cars. But there are a few that are head and shoulders above the rest that have had good reputations for years and years. And now I'm not saying this in brand. I want to be clear. Not brand, Bob, because you compare the brands, Toyota, Nissan, Honda. Not all brands have the better vehicles. It's the models.
Right.
You can have a Hyundai with a certain model that's better than a Toyota with a certain model. So you got to just do your research online and try to get input from, others, and talk to your mechanic and try to make a good decision based on as much information as you can get.
Good info, Tony Joe. Real good info. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you have a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.